Speaker today is Gary Yannick, who will discuss the importance of uniquely identifying enantiomers in method development, analysis, purification, and reaction monitoring. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're feeling fine. Going to talk about the importance of uniquely identifying enantiomers in method development, analysis, purification, and reaction monitoring. Let's see what's going on here. Why is the enantiomer ID important in method development? Because early peaks are taller, better signal to noise ratio, better detection limit. In purification, the early peaks are more concentrated and often more pure. Early peaks contain less solvent to remove. In monitoring, the observed real-time changes in optical activity during chemical reactions can tell you what's going on. Let's see here. A method development station, in my experience, contains many bottles and many columns, as you see here. In fact, in our lab, we use 20 bottles in our eluent mixer and 24 columns in our column selector. So we believe in a mass approach. Here's an example of our method development station. We build master method libraries, been using them for many years. Depends a little bit on the kind of eluent you're going to be using, normal, polar, reverse, normal phase, SFC, etc. Method optimization, obviously you need separation, but elution order is very important. Solubility is extremely important. Stability is important, and recovery from the eluent is very important. Here's an example of how you can change the elution order by different columns. On the left, you see a Welco. On the right, an ODH, same solvents in each case. Here's an example of a diastereomer. You notice on the bottom down here that you can tell that 1 and 3 go together and 2 and 4 go together. In my personal experience, I've never seen a circumstance where the amplitude or the specific rotation is identical. So you can always sort them out if you've got a polarimeter on board. Here's an example of a 3 chiral center job. You notice that these last 2 peaks in the UV are really not enantiomers. And you can see that because they're missing in the polarimeter trace. So you aren't chasing the wrong rabbit. Here's an example of gentamicin, which is an antibiotic. Doesn't have a chromophore, so you couldn't use UV in this case. And the polarimeter also works very well for sugars, which also don't work well for UV. This is my idea of a preparative purification system. We do not collect fractions, we collect peaks. Our software is sophisticated enough to put the right peak in the right bottle. This is an example of a methods purification system based on adjuvant. Here's a larger scale based on SD1. Purification peaks, as you can see, you saw one of these before, but obviously the first peak is going to elute in a lot less solvent. And if you know that you want the first one, then you can turn the job around more quickly. Here's an example of stacked injections. You can see here that if you knew that you didn't want the second peak, that you could push them closer together and let the impurities that were eluting before the first peak come out during the second peak, since you don't care anyway. Here's an example where we did SFC. This is my idea of how a purification method should be running, which means almost none of the time are you putting solvent in the waste. You're collecting enantiomers all the time. This is how we decide which method is the best. We call it the prep predictor. This is available free on our website. It'll tell you the total time, the solvent required, eluent collected, etc. Quite frankly, the biggest separation is not always the best method to run. We use these pragmatic techniques in order to pick the right method. This is an example of how the polarimeter does not see chromophores. The chromatogram here is not important, but this is filtered milk, raw milk with very simple sample prep. So there's a tremendous number of chromophores but we're not seeing them. Why am I showing you this? Because if you have a reaction vessel, you can pump the liquid from the reaction vessel through the flow cell and back to the reaction vessel, and you can monitor the optical activity. You don't necessarily need to separate out all of the chromophores in order to see what's going on. Our polarimeters use wavelengths around 635 nanometers. If you try to use shorter wavelengths, this is an ORD curve. This is optical activity versus wavelength. You can see that in this region where the UV detectors typically operate, you get large changes in optical activity as a function of wavelength, and you even get zero crossing. So you can't even uniquely identify the enantiomers when you're changing solvents and frequency or wavelength. But if you're out to the right, everything stays the same, no zero crossings, everything is accurate and consistent. This is an example of what the polarimeter looks like. When you put the light through the polarizing filter, you get this, in this case, vertical polarization. When the sample goes through the flow cell, it rotates this, and that's the parameter that we measured. This is what the polarimeter looks like. You can confirm enantiomeric separations. You can identify elution order. You can measure EE and specific rotation directly from a chromatogram. You can control fraction cuts. You can detect enantiomers without chromophores, monitor changes in optical activity, and monitor protein peptide conformation. I'm going to skip these because it's a little bit too much marketing. With that, I will say thank you very much. And if you've got any questions, I'm happy to answer. Have a good day.